Sorry, I don't love you. Afraid I've grown accustomed to. Cause with you something isn't wrong, something isn't wrong, something isn't right. I wish you could be happy. Hope this is spoiled by the bottle at the pharmacy. Why does it seem like everybody knows everyone but you? Oh baby,
Hey everyone, welcome to the very first episode of Welcome to Geekdom. It's a podcast I'm going to be hosting on my own, and I will have guests on, most likely recurring guests, such as Jacob Tender, who is our first guest. And basically the idea behind this podcast is to just pick one thing and kind of just dive into that one topic and geek out about it as much as we can. And today with Jacob, we will be talking about how we consume television, which is, a pretty broad topic, but still something Jacob and I can equally geek out about. So Jacob, how are you doing today?
I'm good. Thanks for having me on.
No problem. Thanks for helping me out with some of the little details about this podcast while I was working on it in my head.
No, happy to. I think it's cool. I think shows do well when there's like a, sort of varied topic base. So you can kind of pull different things out, and it helps you because like, I know that, you like to talk about a lot of different things all the time. So it kind of fits with your personality and how you like to talk about things. And at the same time, if somebody doesn't want to listen to every episode, that's fine. It'll be more like, like the Incomparable or something where somebody can pick out a single episode based on something they're interested in. So I think it's a cool concept. Stoked for it.
Yeah, and that's exactly what I do with the Incomparable episodes because, sometimes they'll have Star Trek episodes, and I've never really followed Star Trek. But anytime they have like a comic book episode or a Star Wars episode, I'm like all over those right away.
Yeah, I'm lucky that they actually made a separate RSS feed specifically for the Star Wars episodes. So those
they did?
Yeah, you can find that. I think if you just look for it, if you just look for the Incomparable on Overcast, it'll pop up. But there is a separate feed specifically for Star Wars specific episodes, which is nice.
Yeah, that is nice. I don't subscribe to it, so sometimes I'll just, if my queue is getting low, I'll scroll through and be like, all right, what did I miss out on so far?
Yeah, that's how I do the Nerdist and Marin most of the time. I do let Marin download every week, but I usually just delete the ones that I don't want to listen to.
Yeah, those two are the same for me, except Marin, it's the same with Incomparable and Nerdist. I don't subscribe. I just pick and choose, but then I do subscribe to like the Nerdist Writers Panel and their new comic book feed because those things are typically a little more interesting for me. I might actually not subscribe to the Writers Panel, but that one, it's more, television writers and everything. So then if, I see writers or producers from a show I watch, I'm like, all right, I'll listen to this one.
Something that you can get invested in right away without, knowing too much background. Because I think that's hard. There are some good episodes of Marin that I'll listen to based on other people's suggestions with people that I'm completely unfamiliar with. But mostly I'll listen to it if it's, somebody that I respect or, know the work of in some way.
Yeah, definitely. Well, why don't we go ahead and jump into our TV consumption topic now that we briefly touched on TV writers.
Yeah.
But I know me personally, now that I'm back living at home with, a satellite cable subscription, that is wonderful. And then I also just pay for Netflix. And those are like the two things that I get my television consumption from.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it's like there's so much you can dive into just with those two things.
Yeah, I mean, Netflix really changed the game, didn't they? I mean, I think Netflix is great for a lot of things, but moreover, the TV aspect of Netflix is really the breadwinner there. I think their movie selection is decent at best, but they really do have a great selection of TV shows. And then they have all their exclusives as well, which is, kind of the main draw, I think, these days because they have so many great exclusive shows.
Yeah, and I should note, I do have Amazon Prime, so I get all of that stuff too, but I just
but you probably
tend to
forget about it, right? Yeah.
Yeah, I even bought, a Fire TV stick because for whatever reason, they still don't have an app on Apple TV and it's driving me crazy, but I got it on Prime Day, so it was like $25 or something.
Yeah,
and I was like, all right, whatever. And I basically used it to watch the rest of Batman the Animated Series finally.
Yeah.
So I made my way through that. And they do have a lot of shows I do want to watch. Like I know The Americans is on there and some of the other bigger shows that I just haven't gotten around to yet.
Yeah.
So it's like,
Curb Your Enthusiasm.
I have not watched that.
You need to, or you really should.
I
think
to
everybody
add that to
should.
My very long list.
Right. Yeah, that's the thing, right? Everybody's got super long lists of shows they want to watch. But it's so much easier to watch all these shows because we have so many options.
Yeah, I literally have a checklist in my phone of TV shows I need to watch, and I've been like marking them off as I go through them. So recently, the two big shows that had, a lot of episodes were Batman the Animated Series, and then I went through the Clone Wars before that.
Yeah, that's a lot of episodes.
It's all on Netflix, and I think it was like 100 and something episodes. It was a lot, but thankfully, they're cartoon shows.
Yeah.
So
they're fairly short. They're digestible.
Yeah.
You can fit them in between things and, like a couple before bed or something like that. Yeah.
Yeah, I was frequently watching on my iPad because at least there's an Amazon app there, so...
Right, yeah. So I use a Roku stick, and I was really interested in the Fire Stick and the Fire TV when they came out. But honestly, like, I have no reason to leave the Roku because it's so perfect. It's tiny. It fits behind my TV. I don't even have to know it's there. It's just as fast as I need it to be, and it gives me access to all the services that we have. And between my girlfriend and I, we have Netflix, we have Hulu, we have Amazon Prime, we have a cable login. I've never had cable myself.
Right.
But you know how that works. Somebody
Yes.
had a login to spare so I could watch the Olympics. And we occasionally
Nice.
use that for some of the other networks. Sometimes my girlfriend will watch the Kardashians with that, or I'll pick up something on, Stars or HBO or whatever it happens to be. But yeah, I mean, that's the way that I consumed all my TV. And I watch a lot of TV. Just looking in, I think we'll probably talk about Plex here in a bit, but in my Plex library, I have...
right.
3,100, just about 3,200 episodes of TV shows, and I figure that's probably a lot. I mean, I do watch a lot of TV. I say I probably watch a lot more TV than movies these days. There were a few years
same.
where I watched just about every movie that came out that was worth watching, but I don't know. I think TV fits my schedule a bit better. I can fit episodes in here and there, and I don't know. I love TV, and I love that today you don't have to have a cable subscription. You don't have to flip through channels. You don't have to know when something's coming on. You don't have to fiddle with a DVR or a TiVo. You can either wait for an entire season to come out and binge it, which is generally what I do, or if you have your own means, you can obtain them and import them into your Plex library and watch it that way. And that's how I generally do everything. I watch it straight through Plex.
Yeah, that's crazy because the way I use Plex, it's like once I watch something, I'm deleting it because I don't want that ginormous library, especially if it's just TV shows.
Uh-huh.
And I mean, I do have a few movies saved in there, like the Harmy's edition of the Star Wars movies. I save those in there.
Yeah.
And I have movies that I haven't watched yet in there. But we might as well just talk about Plex now since we brought it up. Basically, for anyone who doesn't know, it's a way to put your personal collection onto that app so that you can watch it through Apple TV, like you said, your Roku, what have you.
Mm-hmm. Just about everything now. You can literally put Plex on any device these days. Yeah,
and I know the way I use it, I have to have my laptop open and everything because that's where I have all of the files hosted, basically.
Yeah, directly on your laptop?
Yeah, I just have a little Plex folder, or I have it pointed at my movies and TV shows folder.
Gotcha.
And that's about it. Because, like I said, the way I use it, I'm not storing a whole lot on there. It's only probably, less than 10 movies at a time and maybe a couple of TV shows if there's something I either missed on TV or just can't find it anywhere else.
Yeah, I've been using it for quite a few years now. That's why my library's so fast. Movies wise, I've got 548 movies in there, and that's after a very big trim that I went through just within the past couple of weeks just to save some space. But I do have multiple external hard drives, and that's where I store all my media. But what I like and what they sold me on years ago, I'm not even sure they use this anymore in their marketing, but it was pitched to me as, your own personal Netflix. So what's great about it is, it's this gigantic library which you wholly curate. There's nothing in there that you don't want. It's exactly what you add. And
right.
For me, I find it most useful, and I actually found it while I was looking for a solution to track the episodes of shows that I was watching. So in college, when I was watching a lot of TV shows, I was having a hard time remembering, where the last one was that I watched and all that. I was looking for, apps that would like track that for me, and I would start using some apps and I would like, okay, yes, I've watched that one, check mark that box. And then I'd forget to update that for a couple weeks. And then I was back to the same problem. So the nice thing with, Netflix or Plex in this instance was that as soon as I watched it, it was marked as watched. So then when you added something new, it would be, hey, this is unwatched. And it would put it right at the top of your queue. And you could just watch through all the shows you haven't seen yet. And that's what I think the big benefit is. And of course, you're running into the issue where you don't have enough space, so you're not filling it up. But if you have an external hard drive, you can do that. Like I said, they're on like anything now. So if you have like a network attached storage device like a Drobo or some sort of NAS solution, you can probably bet that there will be a Plex app available for it. And actually just last week or so, they announced that they have a new option called Plex Cloud, where essentially you store everything on Amazon Drive and you don't even need to have your computer on, which is kind of the way it works or has worked up until now.
Right. Yeah. And you mentioned, using an app to track your TV shows and everything. That's what I've personally been doing. At first, I was using the website Sidereel.
Yeah.
But I didn't really like the look of their mobile app. So I switched over to tracked.tv.
Yeah, that's what I used.
And from there, I have the iShows app on my phone. I think it was a few bucks, but basically you log in with your Track TV account and you can, have a much nicer looking app and everything.
Yeah.
And so that's what I've been using. And you mentioned watching a lot more TV shows than movies, and I'm the same way. I'm the worst at watching movies. And I feel like I just watch so much TV and listen to so many podcasts. Most people are like, do you do anything else? And I'm like, well, I'm unemployed, so not really. It's like, what else am I going to do when I'm not, trying to apply for jobs? But as you and I both know, the music industry isn't, in a plethora of jobs right now as far as hiring goes. Or if they are, it's like all manager and director positions, because I guess everyone's getting tired of it. Yeah.
I mean, it's a tough field. I definitely feel for you there. I mean, I still don't have a job in the music industry, and that's tough. So, it's cool that we come from that background, but we have all these other interests that keep us busy while we're job hunting, I suppose.
Yeah, I feel like I'm doomed right now because basketball season's about to start up. So it'll be football season, basketball season, fall TV season, and the podcast seasons don't really exist except for, a handful of shows maybe. So it's like I will have all of the media to consume this fall.
See, that's where we differ. I don't have the sports, which is nice. So I watch my shows and I listen to my podcasts, and that's mostly it. And I've been trying to read books. But as far as TV goes, what are you watching lately?
Right now, as far as the newer stuff goes, I'm almost finished with Luke Cage. I have 3 episodes left in that. And probably by the time this comes out, I'll be finishing, because it's Monday now and I plan on finishing tomorrow. Maybe I'll get this out tomorrow too. Who knows? I guess we'll find out.
Now, that's a Netflix exclusive?
Yeah, it's one of the Marvel Netflix shows. So like Daredevil and Jessica Jones, this is the 3rd character solo show.
Okay.
And then I don't know if they're doing the Defenders next or Iron Fist next, but it's one of those 2 that I think will be coming up as far as the new Marvel shows go. I know Jessica Jones is working on a 2nd season and Daredevil's already had 2 seasons. So it's like, just with Marvel alone, I'm pretty busy in the Netflix department.
Yeah, I haven't seen any of those yet.
Yeah, I've been really bad with Netflix shows lately. Like, I still have the new season of Orange is the New Black, season 2 of Bloodline. I never did finish Vinyl, which was an HBO show. And I know there's another Netflix show I have. Oh, Narcos season 2.
Yeah.
And I still haven't finished Transparent season 2 from Amazon, and I know they already released season 3. So it's like those are going to be next up on my list if I don't get overloaded with fall TV. But as far as, stuff that's actually on TV goes, I've been watching Atlanta, which has been great.
Yes, me too.
I'm probably going to start watching a show called Conviction. It's with Haley Atwell, who was Agent Carter.
Okay.
So I'm mostly watching that just because she's in it and Agent Carter got canceled and I really liked her as an actress. So I was like, all right, this is kind of down my alley. And I also started Designated Survivor, which is the new Kiefer Sutherland show.
You've named so many shows that I have not watched, which makes me feel better about watching so much TV because there's just so much more out there.
Yeah.
I too have been watching Atlanta. I think it's great. I think every episode has been really interesting and very funny. And some of them very poignant. They have really cool, there are definitely messages that he's trying to get through with the show, which is really cool. I like just about anything that Donald Glover has ever done. So this is kind of a neat project from him. It's definitely very well produced. I really enjoy that. But did you watch The Night Of?
I did not. We lost HBO because we had our 3-month free trial. Yeah. So I didn't want to start it and, be short like 1 or 2 episodes, because the only HBO show I really started watching just to see how good it was Any Given Wednesday, which is Bill Simmons' sports show, basically. I mean, he's had actors on and everything too. The first episode he had Ben Affleck on, but I kind of just fell off with that because it suddenly wasn't on every Wednesday, and it was a little too much for me to want to keep track of. Even with the show tracking app, I was like, all right, is it actually on this week or is it not on this week? Because sometimes my app would say it was on and then it wouldn't record. And I was like, all right, I don't know. I'm kind of over this because, I already consume so much stuff from Bill Simmons that not watching the show wasn't like detrimental to anything, because I follow The Ringer still and I listen to a bunch of The Ringer podcasts.
See, that's why I don't miss like having cable, like having to like figure out when stuff was on to either watch it live or I guess record it in some fashion. Like I used to do that with VHS tapes for like, like Survivor when I used to watch Survivor, but that was always really annoying. And when it didn't record, I would be really ticked off because like there's no way I'm catching that episode again. I just missed it. So I love the internet.
Yeah, with the package my parents have, you can record, I think it's 3 shows at a time. So, between my parents and I, we have a ton of TV that gets recorded to the DVR. But the nice thing with that is you also get a lot of the stuff on demand. So it's not like if you miss something or a recording gets messed up on, especially channels like CBS, Fox, ABC, or whatever. Typically that'll be on demand and available like through the satellite provider. You don't even have to like go download the separate app or anything. Typically it'll just be like hidden somewhere in the DVR if you can find where the on-demand stuff is. Yeah,
I guess a lot of bigger networks now, if you have a cable package, you can use like their specific app. Like if you have a Fire Stick or a Roku or an Apple TV, you could download the ABC app and you could pull up the latest episode of, God, what does ABC have? The Bachelor. You can watch that on demand, which is cool. Like that's kind of their interfaces are generally terrible, but at least the content's there and you can watch it most of the time.
Yeah, that's what I've been doing with Atlanta, just because I feel like my parents will, want their stuff to record first over my stuff. So a few of my shows I just watch later, either through the app or on demand or what have you. And typically it's like, New Girl, Atlanta. So they're like the half-hour shows that I just don't really feel the need to record, because even if I have to sit through a few minutes of commercials, it's not taking up, an exorbitant amount of time just to watch 2 or 3 shows on demand.
And Hulu is still great for this. Like I generally don't watch shows as they're airing. Atlanta is a exception, and Bob's Burgers, when it's on, I'll watch that generally with my girlfriend at least once a week, because we'll be able to find a time when we're both, like able to watch a show together. And if we're not like binging something on Netflix, we'll generally just go on Hulu and see, if there are any new episodes of Bob's Burgers. I'll probably be doing that with Rick and Morty when it comes back, just because I love that show and I hate not having more to watch. So like I'm like really eager to watch more of it. But historically, I binge just about everything. Do you find yourself the same, or do you follow like a lot of stuff while it's on?
With the network TV stuff, I'll watch that while it's on, mostly just because, especially when you have, you know, like the Marvel or DC shows, those get spoiled more often than not.
Yeah.
But it's like, you know, something like NCIS or Law and Order isn't really going to get spoiled for me, because the people I tend to follow on Twitter and what have you, you know, not all of them are into the procedural network shows, so I don't really have to worry about those.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of the people that are watching NCIS or CSI, I mean, they're generally in their 40s and not on Twitter. So,
or they are me.
It's you and James. I know you guys both love that Law and Order. That's something else.
Yeah, and I mean, I do tend to watch a lot of what most people probably consider like the trash TV and everything. Not necessarily,
Jerry Springer?
reality shows. No, not reality shows, but like, shows like The Big Bang Theory.
Oh,
a lot of
okay.
people think that's a really bad show, or like
No,
the
it's a good
procedurals
show.
like NCIS. And I'm just like, yeah, whatever. It's a procedural. I don't have to think about it. Like, I don't want every show to make me think. Sometimes I just want to sit and watch stuff.
Hey, you just want to veg.
Yeah, and I think, a lot of the network shows are pretty good with that. I mean, as far as network stuff goes, Mr. Robot, to me, has been the most interesting thing that's been on network TV in a while, just because of how it's done, how it's written, and how much it kind of gets in your head.
Mm-hmm. See, that's when I really, really, really want to watch. I'm going to wait, though.
Oh, yeah.
That's when I think I'm going to binge. I wait to binge like a lot of stuff. I'm totally fine being behind the conversation in TV. I don't have people in my Twitter community that I talk TV with generally. Like anybody, actually. I really don't find myself talking about TV with people unless they are also binging it on Netflix or something.
Right.
So, like I'll talk Doctor Who with people who have also seen Doctor Who, but I'm like maybe 2 seasons behind on Doctor Who. At this point, I think I'm 3 seasons behind on both Game of Thrones and Ray Donovan. And like, I'm fine with that. I don't feel like the need to rush, because if something's spoiled on Twitter, it probably has something to do with characters that I don't know yet, or if I do, like I don't even remember who they are because it's been so long since I've seen the show. So I'll probably just go back through, rewatch all of Game of Thrones, and then catch up, because there's no way that I remember everything that happened in the first 3 seasons of that ridiculous program.
Yeah, that's one thing I don't watch. Well, I should say that and The Walking Dead are like 2 big shows right now that I have never watched, and I don't really care to watch. I know people think they're really good, but they're just like, they're not my thing. And a lot of people don't seem to understand that when they're huge fans of the show. I'm like, I don't care.
They're like,
if
no,
you
you
are
have
a
to
huge
see
fan.
this. It'll blow your mind.
I'm just like, yeah. And I'm just like, I don't really watch shows that have zombies in them in general. So,
The Walking Dead's another one. I'm probably 4 seasons behind on that. And that was like a thing that I watched with my dad. And since I moved out, like, I just haven't, because it's, it fell out of the routine. So I'll catch up on that on someday. And I have been spoiled in things in that show, but honestly, I'll probably still be surprised when it happens on TV, because I don't like remember exactly what it was I was spoiled on. I just remember scrolling through Facebook and being like, oh, well, that's a shame,
Yeah. And I think lately the 2 shows that have sort of generated the most conversation, at least on my Twitter or Facebook feeds, the first was Stranger Things when that came out.
Right.
And then now that Luke Cage is on, because I follow a lot of people in the comic book world and everything, and even on, the Chorus FM forums, there's, specific threads for a bunch of these shows.
Yeah.
And those 2 have seemed to be the really big Netflix shows.
Yeah. Stranger Things is big. I have a Stranger Things podcast, which stopped at episode 3. My co-host and I got really busy, so we haven't been able to finish that. I think we still plan to, maybe sometime before season 2 comes out, just because why not?
Right.
But based on principle, I have not gone past, I think, episode 4. So,
Okay.
that was a really great show, and I wish I could talk more about that show because it's actually topical. But I haven't finished it, and that's another one where I'm pretty sure I've been spoiled on that a couple times online, but that's fine because really for me, the ending isn't so much the most important thing. I really like the story arc. It's the story itself. I think the writing and the production of the show is more interesting to me than the twist at the end or whatever. And I think Dexter is probably a good example of that. I enjoy the whole show. Yeah. I think that the ending is fine. I'm not gonna, I'm not hung up on the ending of that show or many shows. I'm not gonna argue that that's not the way that it should have gone or anything like that. Because overall, Dexter was a very good show. And the same goes for, Breaking Bad or any number of shows that were, produced in that way and hyped for a very long time. How do you feel about shows like that? Like, you probably talk TV more than I do, maybe on Chorus or maybe with friends or whatever, but do you get hung up on the way that shows end, or are you generally like, whatever?
It's funny that you mentioned Dexter because I finally convinced my mom to watch that.
Okay.
And she's just hitting season 8. And to me, like, when I think back on the show, for that one, I thought the first 5 or 6 seasons were really, really good.
Yeah.
But then I remember it kind of dwindling for me. And, seasons 7 and 8, I didn't care for them as much.
Mm-hmm.
I remember being really upset about how the show ended, but now that I think about it, I don't remember how the show ended. Like, I vaguely have an idea.
Yeah.
So it's like, I know I didn't like the ending, but at the moment I don't remember why. And, when my mom's watching it once in a while, I'll go sit out there and kind of like remember stuff as it goes, or I'll like make her pause it and ask her a few questions so that I can know where it's at.
Yeah.
And with shows like that, yes, I didn't like the ending, but, it wasn't the end of the world. And personally, I liked Breaking Bad all the way through. I don't think I had a problem with that show at all, really. And
yeah, it had a slower season, but it wasn't a bad season. Like, it still mattered.
Right.
Whereas with Dexter, I think it just had a couple really bad seasons. But it picked back up, which a lot of shows can't do. Like, it got good again, which was impressive and a good thing.
Yeah, and I mean, a lot of people are way more critical of TV shows than I am. Like, I could sit down and watch, a lot of shows that people just hate. Like, I think Big Bang Theory is a good example of that. A lot of people don't like that show, whether it's because it's, like scientifically inaccurate or what have you, or really cheesy or whatever. People
I get
don't
the canned
enjoy
laughter
about
complaint a lot.
Yeah, and to me, it's just like, all right, I'm just going to sit there. It's a show I don't have to think about. If it makes me laugh, great. If it doesn't, it's not the end of the world. But more often than not, I still find myself laughing at that show.
Yeah. I mean, for me, It's Always Sunny is exactly the same way. I think that show is ridiculous. I think it's hilarious while I'm watching it, but then when it's over, I'm like, was it really that funny? But it doesn't matter because, like, while I'm watching it, I'm getting what I wanted out of it. I'm getting that laugh. Yeah,
and I find that, with these Marvel Netflix shows, people have been really critical of those, especially, I mentioned in the Chorus forums, people seem to just be really critical of certain things in general. I'm not saying that's a bad thing by any means. Like, that's kind of the point of the forums, is to put your opinion out there and discuss it with other people.
Yeah.
But to me, people are like, oh, this season dragged way more than the other one, and I'm like, well, I found both entertaining, so I can't really complain about it because there's no way I could have done a better job with these shows.
Yeah, I think there's a lot more hype surrounding those ones just because of the inherent geekiness of them. I mean, they're about comic book characters, and whether or not people have followed the comics, they're gonna get kind of like embedded in that culture, and as a result of that, if somebody says like, well, that's not how in the comic, like, people are going to latch onto that and either argue it or agree with it. And that's where you get so much discussion based on, the Flash or I guess a lot of times I get a lot of flack, or I hear a lot of bad feedback about Gotham. And a lot of people really like the show, but those are people that don't generally follow the comics but I have an uncle who I generally only see at holidays, and he's a huge comic geek. And he generally has nothing but complaints for a majority of the major films and television shows that follow the characters. And it's like, well, you know what? I mean, to me, honestly, it doesn't matter, because I know within the comics there are different arcs that go different ways about different points in those characters' histories. And to me, like, I think that's what makes it interesting. It's not the canonized story of those characters per se, but more the different outcomes or the different situations that character could be used as a metaphor for certain things. That's what TV's great about. It's the interpretation, and people get butthurt about a lot of things, and that's just the way it goes. Like I've been talking to a lot of coworkers lately about television shows that we really like and how they ended too soon. And I don't get that much. There aren't a lot of shows where I'm like super bummed out. My favorite TV show of all time is The Newsroom, and it ended after 3 seasons. And I only recently finished the 3rd season, even though it's been out for several years, because I didn't want it to end. I didn't want it to be over because I love that show so much. But I'm like, you know what? I think it's time to actually finish the show. Right. And it was a great ending. And I thought that's awesome, because I would rather see a good show end soon than have it drag out and, become Dexter, where it it got bad for a little while, or even How I Met Your Mother, where it was really bad for a while. So I would rather see a good show end soon. And that's why I watch a lot of British TV, stuff on the BBC. Right. They do a really great thing where their seasons are relatively short. Like, they're long episodes, but they're relatively short. And if the show only goes for 1 or 2 series, so be it. Like, it's a great show, and that's all you need.
Yeah, I've watched a few of those too. I think the main one I can think of right now is Luther. I went back on Netflix and watched that, and it's like they put up season 4 and it was 2 episodes. And you're like, okay, all right, you guys do your thing. Yeah. While I find it odd, it's like I still really enjoy the show, so it's kind of hard for me to complain about not having an abundance of episodes to watch.
No, yeah. I mean, Sherlock, I think, is another great example. The episodes are really long. They're really well produced. They're really well written. The acting is fantastic, obviously. And you always want more, but, at the same time, that if they just stopped making them because Benedict Cumberbatch and Martin Freeman became, way too big for it, that they would be fine, because everything that exists is good. And it's kind of like that band tattoo mentality where they say, right, you shouldn't get a band tattoo until that band is broken up and proved that they didn't disappoint you. Because, how many people are out there with Lost Prophets tattoos and really regret it? It's the same kind of deal. Like, you don't have to worry about that show getting bad because it's over. And that's why I get worried when they decide to reboot things, whether it be movies like The Lion King or TV shows like Dexter. Like, they're talking about bringing Dexter back. And it's like, do you really need to? Like, I totally get that it's a monetarily good idea to do something like that. Like, you're definitely going to make some money on that. But for the people that are really a big fan of a series like Dexter, or, for me, it was Scrubs, coming back and picking up where the show ended really well, and then just kind of destroying the image for the people that really loved it, that always really bothers me. And that's generally where I'll just kind of decide for myself that show actually ended at season 8 and didn't go on to season 9 with interns. That's the way that I generally go about it. But I mean, what do you think? Like, are there shows that, do you think just go on too long, or how do you feel about reboots?
I think, with reboots, it really depends, because personally, I think I only watch one show or 2 shows that used to be a show, but with completely different actors. Like, obviously there was a Flash before, and in the Flash, his dad in the current show was the Flash back then.
Yeah.
So it's almost like they kept a little bit of continuity there, but obviously the story is, different and a lot more well done now, because just the advancement of technology since that first Flash show is way better than it was then. So, all of the effects, they make the Flash a really cool show to watch. And those are things you wouldn't have gotten with the first show. And then the other show is Hawaii Five-0, which is another cop procedural show. And I never watched the original. I didn't realize it was a show before until my parents told me, because they knew it was a show before.
Yeah.
So I don't really have anything to compare that to, because I never did watch the original. And I guess they even have, the same theme song and everything. But to me, it's like, that's another one of those shows where I feel like I don't find myself thinking quite as much during procedural shows. Sometimes, they're fairly predictable. So it's kind of like a whodunit thing, and you leave it at that. And then the next episode, it's kind of a new thing. And to me, those are a lot easier to watch than these, shows where you have to watch the entire thing to understand what's happening episode to episode, like Mr. Robot. It's like if you skip 5 episodes in Mr. Robot, you will probably be so confused.
Yeah. I mean, that's one of those shows where you got to pay attention to the story. It's not something that like goes from episode to episode. And every once in a while, those procedural shows will have those arcs, and those are the ones I like the most. I think that's why I like Criminal Minds most out of all of them, because it had a storyline you needed to follow. Or Bones was another one where like you could watch it, like reruns, and it wouldn't even matter. But then you'd watch one of those reruns, and the episodes with Zach would come on, and you're like, wait, what happened with him? Like, this is really interesting. This is really great writing. What happens next? And then the next episode that comes on, it was from 3 seasons before. So it's like that shuffle order really messes you up.
Yeah, and it's funny that you mentioned Criminal Minds, because that's by far probably my favorite procedural show.
Yeah.
Just because I don't want this to sound like weird or creepy, but serial killers are just kind of a fascinating topic to like dive into.
Yeah.
And I have books that are about, the Manson murders and what have you. And it's not like a huge collection of books, although we did get a lot of Anne Rule books when my grandfather died, because he had like a ton of them, and her books are all true crime books. And then obviously, the OJ case was something that fascinated people, even though he, not a serial killer case. But it's like, when you dive into these real people, but in a almost like in a fictional way, because Criminal Minds obviously is based on real serial killers and real people who were in the FBI, not necessarily by name or anything, but just the idea of those people and that team. Real people went out and did those things. So to me, that's always been really fascinating, because it's not like this completely made up serial killer who, didn't actually exist in real life every single episode. Yeah, you'll have some of those in there. You have to when you have 12 seasons now of Criminal Minds starting,
which is crazy.
I think they're on 12. And, I don't know if you're still watching it or not, but some of the characters, they leave and then they come back, and, each character has a little bit of a past almost that you have to keep track of to sort of understand how they've progressed as a character.
Yeah. No, I think that was the best one. I used to watch that a lot, as reruns on Ion TV. For anybody in the Midwest who has Amish TV with the little digital converter box. But
I think we get Ion.
Do you?
Yeah, it is Ion. Yeah, we get it through Dish, and literally it's always Criminal Minds, Blue Bloods, Law and Order SVU, and I think Leverage. Those are the 4 shows. They do marathons on certain days of the week. I think Criminal Minds is like Monday, Tuesday, Thursday or something. Like Criminal Minds gets a lot of reruns played on Ion.
My family and I used to watch a lot of those shows, and Criminal Minds, Without a Trace, and Cold Case were our 3 big ones. Those are the ones that we watched.
Yes.
Pretty consistently.
I watched all of those too.
They're good shows. I mean, like you say, they're kind of mindless. Like some of them are pretty interesting, and you're there is suspense involved in them if you get invested in the characters, and they're not the most cheesy things in the world. Some of them are pretty bad, but overall, the fact that they're able to produce television like that so consistently is kind of amazing. I mean, like you say, Criminal Minds is going on 12 seasons or whatever. That's pretty impressive.
Yeah, and then you have Law and Order SVU, which I believe is on its 18th season now, and that's just crazy. And Mariska Hargitay, or however you pronounce. Yeah, Hargitay.
I only know how to say that because of the Love Guru.
She's been on it the entire time.
Yeah.
And she's the only one who's been on it from season 1 to now.
Wow.
And it's like, just for her alone, like that is something to pay attention
her contracts are probably really good. I mean,
yeah.
Charlie Sheen didn't get paid more than any other TV actor because he was on a show for a season and a half. He was on 2.5 Men for a very, very long time.
Right.
Yeah. So what about like newer stuff? I know we talked about some of the stuff we're currently watching, but have you caught up on Star Wars Rebels?
Yes, I have been watching that weekly now that it is back on.
I have too. This is the first time I've been watching Rebels live, and well, not live. I don't have cable, but I am watching it usually within a day or so of coming out. And I caught up on the most recent one yesterday, and this is a great show.
Yeah,
like I was really worried when it started because I was a big Clone Wars advocate. I love that show. It got really good at the end, and then they canceled it way too soon, I think, but Star Wars Rebels is like stepping up.
That is one of those shows where it definitely ended too soon.
Yeah, no, I mean that's a show that I think could go on, because it's telling a canonized story, which is like of course, if anybody knows me, I love Star Wars, and for me, like the canonized story is very important. But I think what they're doing with Rebels is very interesting. I think it's more telling of the universe as a whole rather than the story itself, because even though it's close enough to the story that I grew up with my entire life, like it seems completely different in a way, and there are similar characters in the story, which is interesting. Darth Maul being one of the more interesting characters from the prequel movies. He makes quite a few appearances in the show, and his story is expanded quite a bit, which is cool. But I don't know, like I with season 3, they just completely stepped it up a notch. It's completely different than season 2 in terms of tone, and they're only 2 episodes in?
Yeah.
Crazy.
But yes, I have definitely been keeping up with Rebels, and as I believe I've told you before, one of the guys I went to high school with is voicing Ezra on the show. Yeah. And to me, it's like I'll be watching the show, and to hear his voice on TV is still so crazy to me. And I mean, this was just someone I knew because I had a few classes with him. It's not like, we were best friends or anything, but we had a few classes, and we both played basketball. So we were typically in the same place quite a bit while he was going to my high school. But senior year, he left, and he started getting more and more opportunities because, when I was going to school with him, he would show up in like an episode of The Mentalist or an episode of Criminal Minds or something like that. And then he had his own show on Nickelodeon. It was like The Epic Adventures of Bucket and Skinner or something. And it was like him and another guy doing ridiculous things or whatever. And, that wasn't a show I, necessarily sat down and watched. But because this was Star Wars and because he was in it, I was like, all right, I have 2 reasons to watch this show now, because it's Star Wars and I know someone who's in it. And I, didn't really go into Rebels with any sort of expectations. And at the time when I started Rebels, I had not watched Clone Wars yet. But, after talking to you and a few other people, I was convinced I did need to go back and watch all 120 something episodes of Clone Wars. And thankfully Netflix has all of those, so it was nice and easy. But Rebels has definitely surpassed any sort of expectations I did have after season 1. And like you said, it's like they've taken this big step here. And I think even with just these first 2 episodes, it's sort of already paying off. And you can see with, how many people are watching the show, how many people talk about the show and whatnot, because just in the chorus forums, I noticed more people all of a sudden commenting on the Star Wars thread because Rebels came back. And I was like, okay, this is cool. Like, there's a group of people we can talk to about the show. And I feel like it's bringing back that sense of Star Wars community where people get really excited when anything Star Wars comes out. And I think The Force Awakens did a lot of that too, because, we finally got another new movie. And while, it wasn't a perfect movie, because most movies are not, it was still so good to see a new Star Wars movie that a lot of people just talked about that for a while.
Yeah, I mean, there's so much great stuff coming out with Star Wars, and I love Rebels. I think that's great. I'm really excited for Rogue One. I think it's going to be really different. I've already pre-ordered a bunch of the toys, so they should be showing up any day. But I love that the Star Wars universe is able to grow in the way that it is now. 5 or 6 years ago, that I didn't think that would be possible. I thought, okay, Disney's got it. They're going to put out a couple more episodic movies. Like, we've been burned before. Who knows what we're going to get this time? I was apprehensive, but now that I'm seeing that they're, giving the universe room to breathe and still keeping it canonical, they're not just doing whatever with it. They're not Marvelizing the Star Wars universe. They're not just like kicking stuff out there and, we're not going to have like conflicting storylines and stuff like that. There is a group specifically that has paid a lot of money, I'm assuming, to keep the storyline together and keep it straight. So every single thing that happens like is in line. And it's great that like we have TV shows for kids like Rebels and, the Clone Wars, and now we have the main movies and we have side movies that explain characters further in depth and like stories. I think it's great. That there's the books too. Like there's just so much going on that it's, I mean, I can nerd out about Star Wars all night, that, but
yes.
We very specifically didn't choose Star Wars for this episode, so I won't go too long. But you know what I mean? Like, it's just great that we're able to get involved in the Star Wars universe so heavily now.
Yeah, and I think with them keeping it canon and everything, I think with Star Wars, that's a lot easier than, say, doing the comic book shows and everything. I know there have been, and there are currently Star Wars comics, but they've always kind of stayed within that same original realm of, the movies and everything that George Lucas created. And with Marvel and DC, it's like there's been so many different versions of Batman, but he still became Batman the same way. It's just the outcome might have been different. And I think, Marvel has done a great job with keeping the origin the same for these characters, but I think what people don't like is them taking some, creative liberty to tweak things here and there, because just because something works on paper and with pictures doesn't mean it'll necessarily translate to filming a show. And I feel like while I really enjoy comics, and comics are a more recent thing for me, it's like last year when I had my job, I started buying them and getting into them a lot more. So I'm not, one of those comic book readers who is super critical of the shows needing to do everything the exact same way the comics did, because even different writers don't write the same character the same way.
Right.
And I feel like with, Marvel and DC, they have a lot more leeway on where they can take a character. And I know with, Civil War, it didn't end the way the comic book does. No one died in the movie, and someone does in the comics. I won't spoil it if anyone has happened to not have read it by now, even though it came out, I think, at least like 10 years ago or something. But, I feel like it's not necessarily my job to be overly critical of TV shows. I'm not a TV critic by any means. Sure, I did, do reviews of the Mr. Robot episodes, but that's because I liked Mr. Robot so much with the first season that I kind of wanted to see if I could analyze and figure out where the second season was going to go. So for me, that, that was more of a personal thing I wanted to do, but I wasn't like, oh, this episode was horrible and I didn't like this, I didn't like that, or whatever. I tried to talk about what I did like and what I thought the show was doing right, because to me, if I enjoy something, I'd rather write about why I enjoy it, not necessarily the one or two little things that I didn't enjoy, because in the end, those two little things aren't really all that important in the bigger picture of things.
Yeah, when I talk about TV shows anymore, like the very rare occasions that I review anything, it's generally to point out something that I notice that either hasn't been pointed out before,
right,
something that progresses the story or expands my thinking on a certain topic or subject. That's generally it. If I have nothing enlightening to say about it, I don't say anything at all. And I would rather read something about it. You know, I would rather read somebody else's writing on an episode and see what they took from it or what they observed that I didn't notice. I think that's much more beneficial for me.
Right.
But yeah, you know, I get what you say. Like, reviewing stuff is hard. Like, you want to like constantly put stuff out, and when you're watching and listening to stuff or even reading stuff as much as you or I, you're constantly like pulled to like make something. You're like, this was great. This is inspiring. I also want to make something.
Yeah.
And then you're like, well, what if I make something that involves this thing that inspires me? And that usually ends up being a review or a podcast about that thing. And that's hard because like, you don't want to just be like everybody else and say like, this is what happened and this was really great. And I think that they made a mistake here because I have no place to judge how something is made. I did not go to film school. I am a, you know, I'm a couch critic. I watch stuff and I can comment on that, but it doesn't mean that anything I have to say is important or interesting. But if I notice something that I think is interesting in the creation of the movie, I think that's worth commenting on. Or if something is happening within the show, I think that's worth talking about. So if there's something that happened in Rebels, you know, just like this little allusion to something that happened elsewhere in the Star Wars universe, or, you know, a reference to like this greater idea that might have something to do with the rest of this arc, like that's something worth talking about. But I mean, I know I hear what you're saying. That's all I'm really trying to say is like it's tough to write about things consistently when it's just like, what else can I really say about it?
Yeah, and I mean, I've been starting to write for a comic book website, Talking Comics, and they are actually looking for, you know, more than just comic book coverage. So for them, I'll be reviewing The Flash and Supergirl. The Flash starts tomorrow. So, you know, it'll really kind of be a challenge for me to not just do your typical review, even though, you know, the site does want a review. I feel like hopefully I can add something to it that will make it a little more interesting. And, you know, I've been trying to do that with album reviews too. It's like, okay, I don't know how much album reviews really matter anymore, but I like writing about albums. So I'm going to keep doing them for myself, you know, and I just think with the different topics I've been writing about, whether it's, you know, music, TV, comic books, or sports, it's like that gives me a broader range to kind of improve my writing in different ways based on what I'm talking about.
Yeah. No, that's good. I like that you're diversifying so much. I've been listening to a couple episodes with you on it, you know, whether it be the Misaligned episode with James or the Inside Music episode with yourself. You know, I'm getting a feel for how varied you are in the things that you talk about. And I think that's another reason why this podcast is going to be so good for you. You know, I always find you talking on either Twitter or Slack or Chorus about all these things that you plan on reading, and I just keep thinking, like, how long is this girl's list? Like, you
Never
have so
ending.
much stuff that you want to watch, and that's great. Like, I mean, I'm right there with you. There's a lot of stuff that I want to take in, and I do. But I think it's great that you talk about it so much, and that you, like, you know, you use what you are absorbing to, you know, to get stuff out there, to make things, because that's what I really like to see in people. Is I like to see them like doing something with what inspires them. And I'm glad that, you know, I guess, what do you call it, like just pop culture or general entertainment really inspires you to get out there and write about things and to talk about things and to get to know other people through those things. Because you've been making quite a lot of friends here, Deanna Chapman, and it's fun to watch.
Well, thank you. Now I just have to hope this will all lead to me actually being paid to do things. So...
Yeah, that's the trick.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm lucky that I'm fortunate enough to have been able to move home earlier this year. And yes, I have been looking for a job, but as we know, you know, I have a music industry specific degree. So it's like, for me, I sort of have to do something in music industry. I know, sure, you can get other jobs, but to me,
you don't have to.
Right. To me, it's like the reason I got that degree was because I knew I wanted to do something with that specifically. So it's like, for me, sure, I've been applying to, you know, social media jobs here and there for non-music companies. And, you know, it's sort of like lately it feels like my resume has kind of just gone down the black hole every time I send it in somewhere. So I'm basically just trying to do the things I enjoy doing and hoping that in turn will create an opportunity for me. And whether it's, doing the podcast, writing, or, even doing my record label or Hi-Fi Noise or what have you, I'm hoping that one of those things, will work out. And even if, I ended up getting paid to write about sports or something, I would be totally fine with that because I love sports just as much as I love music. So, if that is what ends up happening, I'm fine with that. But I'm still focusing right now more on getting something going with the music. And I've started doing, freelance PR here and there for people. And as you know, because you've done PR before, it's not the most glamorous job. And, I'm doing it really cheap right now because I only have X amount of contacts. And it seems like once Under the Gun shut down, it's like all of my contacts went to Substream. So I'm like, all right, well, I have like 4 people I can email at Substream, but that doesn't really help me if, I need to contact more than one website, so it's definitely
That's where the
a
cold
process.
pitches come in. Yeah. We talked about PR before. There's an episode of Misaligned you should probably link here. That was really good. I think we had some good things to say on that there, but I feel you. I mean, music industry is hard. I went to school for the same thing, and I don't have a legitimate job in the music industry. I have the fortunate opportunity to talk to a lot of people in the music industry because I've been in and around it for such a long time that, people know who I am and they can trust that they can talk to me about, I guess, whatever it is we end up talking about on my podcast, Variable Bitrate. But apart from that, I don't have a job in the music industry, and I'm okay with it because I enjoy music, and I find that unless I were lucky enough to find a job at a label, doing something or doing PR, like I've tried just about everything.
Right.
And I've come to find that when it comes to the music industry or really anything that has to do with creativity, I like to vary myself. And I think if I were to find myself in one job, say at a record label doing one thing, I would be very bored. And unless I had the opportunity to move around within that and, get paid a decent salary where I could enjoy the things that I like to do, I don't think I would even stay in the music industry at that point. I don't think like finding a job in the music industry that paid me would make me ultimately happy. And I think once I really came to terms with that, I became a lot more interested in the music industry again, where I really had started to fade away for a while. So it's, I don't get discouraged, like keep working at it. As long as you're interested in it and there's stuff that you're doing that's kind of around the music industry, paid or not, keep doing it. Cause like, if you like it, just do it. Just do it. It doesn't matter. You'll find work somewhere else. And even if it's a crappy day job or you're lucky and you find an awesome day job that, is accommodating to the things that you like to do, or it gives you the time to do those things, or, something that you enjoy, because like there are other things out there that you can do for work other than music, and you can still do the music thing. You can still do just about anything you want in the music industry while having a different job. Why? Because why not?
Yeah.
Like nobody in the music industry wants to pay you anyway, so just do what it is you want to do.
Yeah, and I mean, I technically did have a job in the music industry, but it was one of those jobs where I stared at spreadsheets for 8 hours a day.
Right, data entry.
Yeah, and to me, it's like, okay, to me, this isn't the music industry. This is like the administrative part. And, it's like, it wasn't working that part of my brain that needed to have something to do all day. It's like there was no creativity with this whatsoever. And it's like I sat at my desk, I stared at a computer. You didn't really talk to anyone all day. And even though, now I'm at home by myself, it's like, I'm calling you on Skype at 3:30 this afternoon to record a podcast. So yes, I still talk to people. Even though it's not, face to face, it's at least better than, going to work, not really talking to people all day, and then going back to my apartment and, being too drained from just staring at spreadsheets all day to, want to go out and go to shows and that sort of thing because, where I wasn't in LA.
Yeah.
So it's like, even if I wanted to go to a show, it was still a hassle to get to LA. So I was like, all right, well, I can't go to shows Monday through Thursday, basically, or Sunday through Thursday, whatever, because I will be miserable the next morning. And I did do that once, and I was in fact miserable the next morning and was struggling to stay awake at work. So it's like, I couldn't do things the way I necessarily wanted to. So then, my parents let me move back home, and I've just been focusing on everything else and sleeping like 100 times better than I was. So, sometimes you just need to kind of take a break if you are able to, and I feel like I should have done this the other way around. When I got back from school, I should have asked if I could take that break and focus on all of this stuff. So I kind of did it backwards. I got a job within a month after getting home, and I got home right before Christmas break because I finished school early anyway. So I know we're way off topic from TV right now, but that's okay. You guys will get over it. And, I went to work the next month and moved and everything. And I was there for that whole year, basically.
Right.
And I moved back home literally New Year's weekend of this year. So it's like, I definitely did things a little backwards, but hey, now I have all the time in the world to consume TV at the moment. So
there you go.
Tie it back in there.
That's what you need. Yeah. I watch TV basically when I get home from work, or if I have a day off. My entire day is devoted to catching up on whatever I have to do.
Yeah.
Usually it's the show, but if I'm working on something that involves like research or just like the kind of boring part of podcast production, doing the social images and the show notes and all that jazz.
Yeah.
I got a TV next to my desk, and I'll toss on Rebels and watch that while I do work, which is kind of nice.
Yeah, I definitely watch, like Luke Cage. I'm the only one in the house watching that right now. So I'll just watch that, here and there during the day while my parents are at work. And then, my mom and I watch stuff together when she gets home from work, because my dad is like typically ahead of us because he'll come home for his lunch break and watch something, and he watches everything out in his man cave in the garage. So,
Nice.
It's like the three of us do watch a lot of the same shows, but we don't necessarily watch them all together just because, my dad has a way he likes to do things. And then,
Right.
my mom and I will just watch that stuff when she gets home, because she gets home a lot later too than my dad, and he goes to bed earlier than both of us do. So it's like, if we necessarily tried to watch everything together, it's like we would probably end up getting so behind just because of how the schedules are at the moment. So, we all kind of like have our different ways of watching stuff. And on the weekends lately, my mom has been doing the Dexter binge watching. So then it's like, during the weekend, it's like she has the TV out in the living room, and if I want to, I can watch, Netflix on my computer or whatever. It's not a big deal.
Right. That's interesting. Hopefully we didn't lose too many people talking about our sad music industry lives, because I think that's an interesting thought. My girlfriend and I watch a lot of shows together, but, our ways of watching TV are very different. I would be more than happy to binge a show for 3 hours, whereas after maybe one, she'll get tired and she's just not into it. She doesn't have like the emotional stamina,
right?
Especially for dramas, mostly dramas. She gets too stressed out to watch more. And like, I totally get that. I'm pretty accommodating about that most of the time, I think. But it's very different, because whereas she'll get really tired halfway through an episode of Sherlock, I'm like, we can't stop this now. But she's like, no, come on, let's pause it. And I'm like, no. Come on, we got to finish this episode.
Yeah, I can't stop a show in the middle either.
Yeah, it's tough, because then I have to get back into it. I got to remember everything that was happening, and
yeah,
I don't know. So, you got to do what you got to do. If you're watching it with somebody, you got to be tolerant of what they're doing. But yeah, it's an interesting point. Everybody watches TV different ways.
Yeah, the only time I'll really stop a show and come back to it is if, my mom gets home, we start something, we go walk the dog, and then we come back. So it's like, we have a half-hour break there. It's not like we're waiting until the next day to finish it. So I'm not, as inclined to completely forget everything I just watched, because it's only been half an hour or whatever. But yeah, it's definitely interesting, all the different ways you can watch TV and even consume TV now, with all the ways to do cord cutting and everything. And one last thing I want to mention is, when I was at my apartment in Van Nuys, I didn't have cable, but I could get some things by logging in with my parents' login. But then, you know, I bought an antenna. It was, you know, like one of those flat HD antennas.
Yeah.
For my TV, so I could get, you know, some of the Packers games that were on CBS or NBC or Fox or whatever. You know, I mostly did that so I could watch sports, because sports are literally the hardest thing to watch live if you don't have a cable package.
Yeah, I had a buddy who he recently married a gal in South America, and he's been living in South America for most of the past year or so.
Oh, wow.
And it's very hard for him to watch Cleveland games down there.
Yeah, I would say so.
He would constantly be texting me like, hey, how do I get The Walking Dead and how do I watch the sports game? So then it'd be like a couple days of trying to figure out some way that he could watch these games live, because he's a sports commentator when he's home. He actually does that on the radio, so that's kind of his job.
That's cool.
So it's like super painful for him to miss out on that. And while I don't really get that, I can kind of sympathize with that. So I totally, that I can see why going out and buying an antenna, however archaic that may seem, would be the best option for you.
Yeah, and even, you know, when I was in Philadelphia, Zach and I didn't have a TV in our apartment, so I was always trying to stream Lakers games, and the Lakers games didn't come on until 10:30 Eastern time, so I would literally be staring at my computer until like 1 a.m. just to watch Lakers games, and my friends were like, "You're crazy." I'm like, "But it's the Lakers." Right. And I was like, I am crazy, but it's the Lakers.
That's wild.
Yeah.
So what's the plan for this show? What's next?
Well, I think, you know, between you, Jason Tate, James Shotwell, a lot of people I know who have their own podcasts and, you know, can record on their end and everything, I'm going to start with those people and see how many, you know, different topics we can run through. Because like you said, you're a huge Star Wars fan. And I know Jason and James also enjoy Star Wars and movies. And, you know, I was on the Encore podcast recently. And when Jason was on my podcast, it's like, that was the first time I really had a conversation with him, was when he was on my podcast. And we went for, you know, an hour and 45 minutes. So him and I have a lot in common already. And, you know, I do plan on touching on sports a bit on this podcast, and whether that's, you know, a team specific topic or, you know, just a sport in specific, that I'm not entirely sure on, because again, it depends on what the other person has in mind too, because I know you and I ran through like 2 or 3 different ideas.
Couple of topics,
yeah, and we settled on this, and I just want to talk to people not only about things I really enjoy, but things they enjoy as well. Because, you know, I think with Jason, I suggested we talk about a comic book that he really enjoys, but I have not read it yet. So I don't even know, you know, what to expect necessarily. And, you know,
are you going to read it beforehand, or are you just going to go into it cold?
Oh no, I have it on my shelf. Like, I bought it and I just haven't gotten to it yet. So I have it. I just need to read it. And so, you know, that's not confirmed yet or anything. Like, I don't have anything planned definitely past this episode, but I have, you know, all of these people in mind.
Ideas.
I've talked to you, I've talked to Jason, and, you know, my co-host Megan on Misaligned. Her and I have quite a bit in common. And, you know, with our book club that we're doing for Misaligned, that's supposed to focus on music and pop culture specifically. But I'm sure, you know, her and I have other books in common that we could talk about and that sort of thing. But yeah, I definitely want to just talk about a wide range of things, because like you mentioned earlier, I talk about a lot of different things, whether it's the Packers, the Lakers, you know, music, books. You know, I definitely do not have a one-track mind when it comes to any of this stuff. It's like, you know, I'll be like, oh, I have to listen to this album. Oh, but I want to read this book. And it's like, I'm all over the place.
Can't do it all at once.
Yeah, I'm all over the place with stuff so often that I feel like it'll be pretty easy to consistently find topics to talk about, especially since my tastes vary so much. So right now the plan is to, you know, try to get this out once a week. Hopefully, I don't have to wait too long on the iTunes feed because you know how that goes with first episodes.
Yeah, it generally takes a little while. I think Stranger Things one took, I think it was over a weekend, and that was the issue. But it took like 4 or 5 days maybe.
Right.
But on the other hand, I've had feeds that go up within like 4 hours. So it's kind of a crapshoot. Depends on
and
who's working over there.
Yeah, what day and what person you get that day.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
But yeah, so really, I just want to talk to people about things we both really enjoy and can easily go in depth on. And I think, you understand this because you have a Stranger Things specific podcast and a Star Wars specific podcast. And while those are already, more narrow topics, you can still say so much about those things in general that to just do one episode about one topic seems hopefully pretty easy to manage.
Right. Yeah, no, I think so. I think if you get the right person, you're talking about, something that they enjoy, it should be easy. I mean, we tossed around ideas for this show being, Star Wars comics, which I'm generally way behind on.
Right.
I did recently go through and open up all my comics and peel off the stickers so I can get the digital copy because I read all of my comics on my iPad like a weirdo.
Yeah.
But, got to keep those comics in good shape for later. And then Frank Ocean, honestly, obviously I could go on and on about either of those things forever, but I thought that this would be like a good, general topic to kind of get people into the idea of just how nerdy we are and kind of talk about the expanse of different things that you enjoy as a lover of television.
Yeah, and I think my reasoning behind not doing Frank Ocean was like, I have Misaligned as a music podcast and Sports Up was my sports specific podcast. So I didn't really want to start with either of those two topics just because I felt like, okay, that's kind of predictable. Oh, she likes music. She likes sports.
Oh, you got to show you can talk about something else.
Yeah. So hopefully this will get off to a good start. And, I've already told a handful of people about it. I made the Twitter put out there that the podcast was going to be starting this week. Hopefully, I can edit this by tomorrow and get that iTunes feed submitted. I am, testing out a new podcasting service. It's Fireside FM, which is Dan Benjamin's.
See, we should talk about this after the show because I want to talk to you about that. But
okay.
I don't think anybody listening to this will care.
Yes, this is true. I know, when I was on or when I had Jason on, we got like really nerdy and lost a few people, but that's what we have podcast chapters for, people. So,
There you go. Yeah, no, it's a good idea.
But yeah, I just really want to thank you for coming on and being the first guest on this podcast that I have a plan for, but didn't really plan for,
Hey, I'm honored.
Awesome. Well, thank you. And thanks to everyone who has given this podcast a shot. Go tell all of your friends if you want. Hopefully definitely by the time you're hearing this, it will be on iTunes. So feel free to rate and review the podcast. But, thank you guys really for listening to anything I do. I know personally when I started podcasts, I could not stand listening to myself. So if any of you do, in my opinion, that's a win. So thank you guys. And, as always, I hope you guys all enjoy the rest of your day.
Cheers.